Yo, what up, y'all? Ogechi here, also known as Oaghaji, and I'm back with another video, and it's time for another review. Now, today's review is going to be on the first story arc in the Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star manga series, created by Buronson and Tetsuo Hara. And this particular story arc is going to be the Shin arc. Now, the story takes place in 1990X after a devastating nuclear war. The planet is the planet is on the brink, is basically a mere shell of its former self, let's say that, you know what I'm saying? The oceans, the seas, and all that water, all that is just gone. All the buildings and famous centers are in ruin. But surprisingly, humanity survived. And because of this money is of no practical use anymore, since it's a post-apocalyptic world. The only thing that people can survive on is through food and water and even gas. And people have to do what they can to survive, which means resorting to the more barbarian age, be involved with ruthless gangs and all that stuff. The strong will survive, and while the weak will follow or die. You know what I'm saying? And all the innocent people who are victims of this. You know what I'm saying? And but then their mysterious man will appear upon the ruins. First, the gang known as the Z gang, comes in, do their usual marauder stuff. You know what I'm saying? Stealing the food and water and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? And all the most of the technology is pretty much useless except for maybe some guns and some explosives. You know what I mean? And, the Z gang, is ruling the whole territory as of late until, especially, Lord Zed, how shall I put this? Being the usual, ruthless, gang leader in this post-apocalyptic world. Until one of his men came in and they're trying to say, Hokuto, and then his head explodes. Zed's trying to find out who's responsible. Meanwhile, this said mysterious man walks around the desert trying to find some food and water. Thinking about, a woman, that he loved. On arrival, he came to a village, but he fell into a trap set by the villagers. And then, he was put in jail and all that stuff. And then he meets this thief called Bat, you know what I'm saying? And Bat tells him the stuff what's happening in the village and how, they're trying to defend themselves against Lord Zed and all that stuff. Then, a young girl named Lynn comes in to bring them food. Bat tries to steal the key, but Kenshiro stops him. You know what I'm saying? And he eats the food and thanks her and asks for some more and some extra water. And he comes to find out from Bat that she's mute. Kenshiro fixes this by hitting a pressure point and saying that it will be up to her to have the strength to speak. The emotional and spiritual strength, I would say. Then later on, the village elder decided to have, this named Kenshiro be, inspected to see if he's part of the Z gang. Come to find out he has a man he has 7 scars on his chest. And he felt that, whenever the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, Hokuto, you know what I'm saying? Wherever Hokuto appears, trouble comes in. Or at least the best way I can describe it. And the village elder decided to send him his way, you know what I'm saying? Then we get to see that the Z gang and their leader, Lord Zed, comes in and terrorizes the village. And Lord Zed captures Lynn. They knew that they can't do nothing about that. Then suddenly, Kenshiro comes in and again decides to save the day. mobs forward with the goons, and their heads explode. And then the village elder recognizes that this martial arts is Hokuto Shinken. Kenshiro tells Lord Zed to let the girl go. Then, but before all that happened, Lin calls out his name, says Ken, and she finally spoke. You know what I'm saying? Just almost forgot about that. Anyway, Lord Zed realizes that he was the one that killed that Kenshiro was the one who killed his man, and decides to crush Lin's neck. But Kenshiro stops him by using the Hokuto Shakuritsuken, or the North Star 100 Cracked Fists. And we get an explanation that Hokuto Shinken is an ancient assassination martial art that originated in China, and it's an internal martial art, you know, or I should say it has some pressure point techniques where the opponent dies internally instead of externally. And Lord Zed said that his fists are nothing more than mosquitoes, and then Kenshiro says the famous line, "Omae wo mu shinderu." No, and then Zed says, "Nani?" and his head explodes. As y'all know, "Omae wo mu shinderu" means you're already dead. Afterwards, you know, the village is in peace, at least for now, and Bat decides to accompany Ken throughout his journey in the post-apocalyptic world. Now, you know, Lin wants to come, but the village elder says no, because, you know, it felt it would be best if he left. Now, throughout this arc, Kenshiro, Bat, and then later on Lin will come to help him, you know, on his journey, and he fights against many foes like Diamond, I think this Spade, and a couple of others. And there's also, you know, the one that has like praying mantis kung fu and a bunch of other enemies with martial arts. Then we come to find out that his journey is to find this woman named Yuria, who is his fiancée, and who has been kidnapped by his former best friend Shin, who is a successor of a Nanto Seiken martial art known as Nanto Koshoken, or the South Star Long Eagle Fist. Nanto Seiken, aka the South Star Holy Fist, while Hokuto Shinken is the North Star Divine Fist. You know, they're not to fight each other. They're meant to come together for a better tomorrow and to protect the world and things of that nature. But Shin broke this oath and kicked down the tomb of the master Ryuken. Kenshiro was furious about this, while Shin says that he's going to take Yuria, and Kenshiro was not having it. They fight, and Shin emerges victorious, and because of this, he decides to torture Kenshiro, trying to force Yuria forcing Yuria to love him instead of Kenshiro. And as y'all know, he uses his Nanto Seiken technique, his Nanto Koshoken technique, to imply 7 scars into Kenshiro's chest. And then and he felt that in order to protect Kenshiro, Yuria says yes to Shin's request. But before that, Kenshiro tells Yuria to promise him to live on for him. You know what I'm saying? And yeah. Sorry y'all, I got messed up on that. Anyway, Shin decides to leave Kenshiro for dead, and Yuria screams her name while Kenshiro screams her name. And, you know, and that's the bit of the story of the backstory with Kenshiro, Yuria, and Shin. And then within the later chapters in this arc, Kenshiro finally faces Shin. But before he faces Shin, he faces off against Mr. Hart, one of Shin's, men, who is, known as the martial arts killer, because his body, absorbs very, external blows and things like that. And it shows that, Mr. Hart is definitely is a very, pretty decent foe. He gave Kenshiro a hard time, I would definitely say. Um, but, Kenshiro was able to find a way to defeat Mr. Hart by using some powerful kicks and used a technique called Hokuto Ju Hazan. And basically tells him that he's already dead. And they get the famous line from Mr. Hart, Hidebu, which is awesome. Afterwards, Kenshiro and Shin have their fight. But unfortunately for Shin, Kenshiro has gotten stronger. And it was basically a one-sided fight, because of, and, suffice to say, Kenshiro defeats Shin with ease, and after when he finds out, and before that, Kenshiro finds out that Yuria is still alive before they have their fight. Now, anyways, like I said, Kenshiro defeats Shin, but he comes to find out that Yuria, that he's seen was a doll. Because Kenshiro thought Yuria was killed after Shin, uses his technique on her. But, again, Kenshiro finds out that it was a mannequin. And Kenshiro was furious, and then he saw Shin cry, saying that the real Yuria is dead, telling her, after the burning of the Southern Cross, the city that he built for Yuria, Shin will still thought that he can still, get her love by deciding to build a new Southern Cross, and Yuria was in shock. She couldn't take more of Shin's cruelty, and decides to commit suicide. And says to Ken, "I'm sorry that I couldn't keep my promise." Shin was devastated, and he cried and screamed her name, Yuria. And Shin tells Kenshiro that it was the first time that he ever cried. And he realizes that he could never get Yuria to love him, and that her heart already belongs to Kenshiro. And before he died, he tells Kenshiro that Southern Cross and all that stuff, the wealth, all that didn't matter to him. The only thing that mattered to him was Yuria. And upon his dying breath, he said, "It looks like this is the end. However, I won't die by your fists. Kenshiro, farewell." And then Shin jumps down to his death. Kenshiro was in shock, and he decides to bury Shin after he found his body. And before that, Lin, Bot, Bot along with Lin, they realize that, Ken is still here. Well, let me take that back. Lin comes back and realizes that Ken is still alive. Again, this is different in the manga compared to the anime adaptation. And Bot asks Kenshiro, why would he bury Shin? And Kenshiro tells him that because he loved the same woman that I loved, which is true. And he buries Shin, and he says to Shin, "Farewell, my friend." Now, I gotta say, the Shin arc is pretty cool, you know what I'm saying? Now, it does have its flaws, more specifically the fight between Kenshiro and Shin, that it is one-sided. Though, to be fair, Buronson and Tetsuo Hara didn't expect the manga to go on as it did later on in the story arcs. They thought that the Shin arc was going to be it, but they realized that, the arc became a success, and then they were able to do more story arcs, which is cool, you know what I'm saying? So, it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good introduction arc to the manga Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star, you know what I'm saying? And I also, the story, what I'm saying? And the artwork is pretty good, the action is just awesome, some awesome martial arts action, being inspired by Bruce Lee, obviously, while also being inspired by Mad Max, you know what I'm saying, which is cool, you know what I'm saying? it's obvious that Kensho is an homage to both Mad Max and Bruce Lee. And the Japanese actor, I forget his name, I think it's Yamatos or Yamashito. He's half Japanese, half Korean, who's a very popular actor in Japan. I forgot his name. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, name his name in the comments below. But yeah, overall, the Shin arc is a pretty good introduction arc. Like I said, it's not perfect, you know what I'm saying, by any means, but it's definitely pretty good. And the manga definitely gets better in the later arcs in the story. So this arc gets a 4.4 out of 5, I would say. Hopefully y'all enjoy this review. Sorry that it's a little long because I want to make sure I describe the plot of this arc as best I can. You know what I'm saying? There's a little bit more to it, but I don't want to spoil it and it's already long as it is. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. And I also apologize for some of the errors here and there. So, yeah, let me know what y'all think about the Shin arc in the Fist of the North Star manga in the comments below. You know what I'm saying? Y'all can also follow me on my other social media accounts. If y'all like this video, y'all can hit that like button, share, subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified of the uploads. And stay tuned for more other reviews and more other videos along the way. So with all that said, this is your boy, Ogechi Aghaji, aka Oaghaji, aka the Perfect Sensei, signing out. Peace.